Hey, welcome to the Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman. Press Box Chronicles is hitting the road. We're taking you behind the scenes and into the stories in 4 cities across the country for our first ever City Series tour. Philadelphia, New York City, Los Angeles, and Dallas. To get all the details, make sure you're following Press Box Chronicles on all platforms for behind the scenes content, tour updates, and exclusive drops. This is the Press Box Chronicles City Series. 4 cities, 1 cranky middle-aged sports writer. We'll see you there. Hey, welcome to the Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman, the show where a cranky middle-aged sports writer who's seen it all, that is me, takes you behind the scenes and into the stories. I am your host, Jeff Pearlman. And today's episode is one that I think we've gotten the most requests for. And it was an idea I definitely had in my head a while ago, kind of forgot about, came back, forgot about, but I keep getting requests, and we keep getting requests. And I just think it's a story worth telling. And this is the saga of a 24-year-old Kansas City Chiefs halfback named Joe Delaney, number 37, who, was a hero on the field in the way we describe football players as heroes on the field, but more than anything, committed one of the most, if not the most, heroic, selfless acts of just courage and decency and bravery that I've probably ever heard of. And when I think of heroes in sports, I think more than anything of Joe Delaney. And that's who we're going to get into. The life and amazing, amazing gift given by Joe Delaney of the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think in sports, we use the term hero way, way, way too often, because I think it makes the term itself sort of flip. Oh, he was the hero for hitting a home run. He was a hero for running for a touchdown with no time left on the clock. He was a hero. And I just think if you really dig deep into it, there's a difference between being a standout, a star, the performer of a game, and a hero. Like Pat Tillman was a hero, whoever you want to pick. Martin Luther King was a hero. General George Patton was a hero. Heroes are different. Heroes are special. Heroes aren't just doing something on an athletic field in front of fans. They're doing something that changes your life. Gloria Steinem was a hero. Nelson Mandela was a hero. And I think in this regard, Joe Delaney fits. And Joe Delaney was a kid born October 30th, 1958, in Houghton, Louisiana, spelled Haughton, teeny tiny town. And when he was growing up, there's one high school, there's a corner grocery, there's literally one traffic light in the entire town. And the town of Houghton is divided by railroad tracks. And you find this in many southern towns. And you have the white side of town on one side, and you have the black side of town on the other side. And there was a writer named John James Marshall of the Shreveport Journal who wrote, Joe Delaney transcended the railroad tracks, figuratively, just tore them up and threw them down as if they were a couple of rookie defensive backs. Joe Delaney wasn't white or black. Joe Delaney was Houghton. Whatever color that made him was just fine with them and fine with him. And Joe Delaney was a kid in a small town, not unlike, I wrote Walter Payton's biography. And when Walter Payton was growing up in Columbia, Mississippi, he was there during the desegregation of the schools. And Walter Payton was very instrumental in bringing white players and black players, football players, together to form a unit, because he had this thing about him. Not only was he the best athlete, but he had a spirit and a decency and a goodness and a sense of unity that just worked wonders. And Joe Delaney in Houghton was the same way. And Joe Delaney was an outstanding football player and track star at Houghton High School. And this is in the Northwest Louisiana corner of the state. As a football player, he actually was a wide receiver and defensive back. His father didn't want him to play running back because he was worried about the punishment he would take. In track, he was just an absolute burner. He ran a 10.1 100. He ran a 20.8 200. He was one of the best athletes in the country. Recruiters come in droves. He could go to LSU. He could go to Mississippi State. He could go to Alabama. He could go to Auburn. He could go to Texas. He could go to Tennessee. But he decides to keep it kind of local, and he goes to a Division I AA program, Northwestern State. And he's there from 1977 to 1980, and he switched to halfback. And when Joe Delaney starts playing halfback at Northwestern State, he just lights it up. In a game against Nicholls State on October 28th, 1978, 28 carries, 299 yards, 263 in the second half of the game. At the time, the 263 yards and a half was an NCAA record. He scored 4 touchdowns, one on a 90-yard run. Team wins 28-18. Delaney plays 4 years at Northwestern State. He has 3,047 yards rushing, 31 touchdowns, 188 points. As a senior, he's the 8th in the nation in all-purpose yards. And as scouts from the NFL came pouring to teeny tiny Northwestern State, they're just blown away by this guy. And there's a consensus, as one scout said anonymously, if Joe Delaney is at USC, he's a Heisman Trophy winner, and it's not even a debate. He's just awesome. He also is a dominant performer on the Northwestern State track and field team. They win. Northwestern State's 400-meter relay team wins an NCAA championship. He sets the school record in a 200-meter dash with a 20.64. He's just awesome. And in the 1981 NFL draft, the Kansas City Chiefs use a second-round selection on Joe Delaney of Northwestern State. And clearly, certainly in Kansas City and across the nation, there's a kind of like, who? Joe who? Who is this? George Rogers, South Carolina Heisman Trophy winner, goes first overall. Freeman McNeil, this beautiful slashing back out of UCLA, goes third overall. Nobody knows who Joe Delaney is. Joe Delaney? Who the hell is Joe Delaney? Well, his rookie year with the Chiefs, he's awesome. The Chiefs are a mediocre football team with Bill Kenny at quarterback. It's not a great cast of characters, but Delaney runs for 1,121 yards, 4 touchdowns, averages 80.9 yards per game. And he's absolutely awesome. And there's one game in particular, November 15th, 1981, the Chiefs and the Houston Oilers square off. And at the time, the leading rusher in football is Earl Campbell of the Houston Oilers. And everybody knows Earl Campbell. He's a star of stars. And on this day, Joe Delaney has a coming out party. He runs for 193 yards. He tears up the Oilers. The Chiefs win 23-10. And after the game, Elvin Bethea, a defensive end for the Oilers, says, "I've played against the best. O.J. Simpson, Gale Sayers, Walter Payton, and this guy Joe Delaney ranks right up with them. He is great with a capital G." And Delaney is freaking great. He's just great. He has one game after another. They're playing the Broncos. He has a 75-yard touchdown run. It's called offside. A couple plays later, he runs an 82-yard touchdown run. He tears up the Oilers. He's just fast and quick and explosive and twitchy, and he's really, really freaking good. The following season, 1982, there's a players' strike, and Joe Delaney also suffers from a torn retina in his eye. He only runs for 380 yards, but the skills are all there. The talent is all there. And heading into the 1982 offseason, with the strike ended, the thoughts are, all right, the Chiefs are going to come back. 1983, they have a lot of pieces missing, but the one guy they have is one of the best halfbacks in football, one of the best young halfbacks in football, the amazing, the outstanding, the fast as lightning, the hard to tackle, Joe Delaney. And what can be better than having a great halfback like Joe Delaney as the centerpiece of your team? And then the unthinkable happened. Hey, I want to take a moment today to give a huge, enormous thank you to Mint Mobile for sponsoring today's episode, because I honestly never thought I would get any sponsors. And getting support from a sponsor like Mint Mobile, A, it means a ton to me, and B, it's honestly what makes the Press Box Chronicles possible. You're probably wondering why I like Mint Mobile. First of all, it's easy and it's online. Mint actually reimagined the wireless shopping experience and made it easy and online. So there's no stores, no salespeople, no annoying people like John Rocker. It's premium wireless without the premium price tag. So all plans include unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. That's actually pretty sweet. There's free calling to Mexico, Canada, and the UK if you have any friends in the UK. I actually have 3. Plus, hotspot is included, and that's 10 gigabytes of hotspot on Unlimited Plus. Another thing is coverage on the nation's largest 5G network. So Mint, because they're awesome, provides 5G coverage to 98% of Americans and 4G LTE coverage to 99% of Americans. Another cool thing is Mint has something they call the BYO everything, or don't, your choice. You can bring your own unlocked phone or shop the latest phones with Mint. No matter which route you take, you can keep your phone number and all of your existing contacts when you switch. And I can tell you from experience, changing your phone number, blows. You can literally sign up and activate in minutes with eSIM from the comfort of your own home, meaning you don't have to get up, go to the store. Best of all is Mint Mobile offers a money-back guarantee. All of Mint Mobile's plans come with a 7-day unconditional money-back guarantee. For a limited time this holiday season, you can get 50% off an unlimited premium wireless plan from Mint. Just lock in Mint's lowest price of the year and pay only $15 a month for a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. Now, let's dive back into the story. On June 29th, 1983, Joe Delaney was back home in Louisiana after not the best season ever with the Kansas City Chiefs. And Joe Delaney loved Louisiana. He loved being home with his wife, with his kids. He loved Southern food. He loved his 7 siblings. He loved his mom. He just loved being back. Louisiana felt like home. He had no doubt he was never going to be a guy who moved to New York or Los Angeles. He was never going to be a guy to show up with a bunch of jewelry and earrings. And like, that wasn't him. He was a small town country guy from the deep South who loved hot days in the sun, who loved sweat coming down his brow, who loved just kicking back and grabbing a piece of grass and putting it between his lips and just kicking back and a nap in the hot day. That was Joe Delaney, as much as football player was Joe Delaney. And on this day, June 29th, he's at a place called Critters Creek, and it was an amusement center at Chennault Park in Monroe, Louisiana. And he's sitting back, and it's in the 90s, and he's just kind of kicking it with his friends, talking. And from a nearby watering hole, he hears screaming. He hears, "Help, help, help." And there was a pond, and it was big. It was about 2 acres big and about 6 feet deep. There are these 3 kids. There's Harry and Lamarcus Holland, 11 and 10-year-old brothers. And then there's Lancer Perkins. And these kids are swimming, and they're struggling to stay afloat all of a sudden. They thought the pond was more shallow than it was. And Joe Delaney hears this, and he gets up and he starts running. And this is Joe Delaney, who gave back money and more money and more money to local charities. This is Joe Delaney, who would show up at the local 4-H club, who would show up at the local church. This is Joe Delaney, who never met a teammate he didn't say hi to, never met a teammate he didn't ask how his day was going. This is Joe Delaney, who everyone on that Chiefs roster spoke of with such reverence and such joy. And he was just a good guy, and he was just a great guy, and he loved his kids, he loved his wife. This is Joe Delaney. And he hears these kids drowning in the nearby lake, and he jumps in. And Joe Delaney did not know how to swim. When he and his family would go to the ocean, Joe Delaney was a guy who stayed away from the waves because he was not comfortable. When they would go to a pool, Joe Delaney was happy to sit with the towels. He didn't like being in a boat because he was not comfortable. It just wasn't his thing. But Joe Delaney, 24 years old, in this moment, heard these 3 young boys screaming for their lives, and he dove in. And I want to emphasize this times 1,000,000,000. How many of you, if you couldn't swim, would dive into a lake to save someone? Someone you didn't know, 3 kids you didn't know. You didn't know them. You don't know how to swim. I don't think I would, being honest. I can't imagine not knowing how to swim. I'd jump into a lake. Well, Joe Delaney jumps into the lake. And the one kid, Lamarcus, somehow gets out, and he credited Joe, although there was no one could tell quite what happened. And Joe Delaney and the 2 other boys drowned and died. I swear to God, I think about this one, and it just blows my mind. You are 24 years old. You have your own family to worry about. You have a career that's taking you these great heights. All your dreams are coming true. And you have the kindness and the empathy and the compassion and the decency and the freaking globe-sized heart to dive into a watering hole and save these kids who can't swim, even though you can't swim, and you drown. And when news got out that Joe Delaney had died in this way, there were 2 main reactions. Number one was just profound, profound sadness and pain and sense of loss, and the wailing at the funeral in Houghton High School in the gymnasium was just unbearable. The sobs from white people, from black people, from people who knew him well, from people who didn't know him well. But the number two reaction was, that makes perfect sense. That was Joe Delaney. He was the guy who's going to go into the water. He was a guy who was going to do it. And back in 2003, when I was writing at Sports Illustrated, one of my colleagues, the great Rick Riley, wrote a column about Delaney and what happened. And I still think, more than anything I've read about the tragedy, he really hit it. He wrote, "What made Delaney that kind of person? Why did he mow that lonely woman's lawn when he was back home in Houghton, Louisiana, rich as he was? Why did he check in on that old man every day he was in town? Why did he show up on the Houghton streets one day with a bag full of new shoes and clothes for kids whose names he'd never heard? Why could he never think of anything that he wanted for himself? Why didn't he even make a Christmas list? The man never cashed a paycheck in his life. He would throw his checks on top of the TV for his wife. 'Don't you want nothing for yourself?' Carolyn would ask Joe. 'Nah,' he'd say, 'you just take care of you and the girls.' 'Nothing? Well, if you could give me a little pocket change for the week, I'd appreciate it.' Why didn't he ask somebody else to help those 3 kids that day? After all, there are hundreds of people at the park, and not another soul dived into that pit. Nobody but Delaney, one guy who shouldn't have." And 43 years later, long after Joe Delaney is gone, I think the answer is actually obvious. Joe Delaney dove into the water because he just wanted to do the right thing. And he just wanted to stand up for other people. And he wanted to be there for other people. And I doubt he even thought of it through that way. I think he heard the crying of some boys and thought, I need to help them. And after his death, Ronald Reagan honored Delaney and his family with the Presidential Citizens Medal, which was presented to them by the Vice President George Bush. The Chiefs the next season wore a 37 patch in his memory. The NCAA has an award now in his honor for valor. But I honestly think, more than anything, the legacy of Joe Delaney is a legacy of just wanting to help people, of just trying to do the right thing, of being a good human being, of looking at someone struggling and giving them a little money, of seeing someone needing a little food and buying them a sandwich. And for me, the legacy of Joe Delaney, more than anything else, more than anything he accomplished in a very short life and a very short football career, is just a willingness to do the right thing. Because far too often, doing the right thing seems incredibly, incredibly hard. And for Joe Delaney, there was no other way. That is a wrap for this episode of Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman. Do me a favor, leave a comment below on what stories you'd like to hear more about, or if there's a sports figure you're interested in. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Follow me on TikTok at Jeff Pearlman Author and on Bluesky at Jeff Pearlman. My new book, Only God Can Judge Me, The Many Lives of Tupac Shakur, is out and available wherever you buy books. Thank you so much for diving behind the scenes and digging into the story. We will see you next time on Press Box Chronicles.